So I'm delighted this afternoon to be with John Williams. So John's presented at a number of events. One of the biggest events is MIPIM. So MIPIM is a massive event which takes place every year or normally does, but things are different this year, not just in property, but everything's affected, and specifically in property, commercial property more so than anything else, and particularly things like office, leisure, tourism. And John's specialism is office. So massive thanks, John, for taking time out this afternoon. And for
Okay.
our listeners who don't know you, do you want to just explain a little bit about your background, some of the companies you've been involved with?
Yeah, sure. So I was at Knight Frank for 4 or 5 years, and subsequent to that, worked as a consultant at Land Securities in Brookfield and Sotheby's Realty, NHBC, so a variety of resi and commercial operators. Since that time, though, I've predominantly been Chief Marketing Officer at Instant, who are probably, hopefully, was leading authority on flexible workspace. So within my team, we pull together more data from more centers that run co-working and serviced offices around the world. It gives us, from a supply and demand and pricing perspective, arguably the best global view on just how much serviced offices and co-working has grown, how much more it can grow, and where demand has come from. And why that's been particularly significant at this given time is not so much how much flex workspace demand has evolved, but will it come back post-COVID, and to what extent? And Instant's view of that is twofold. And the reason we can capture that is our website lists more co-working spaces than anyone else globally. So we currently track around 33,000 centers across 4 different continents. But we also run about 2.5 million square feet of space as a service. So bespoke flex space procured and delivered by ourselves for big brands like Barclays, Amazon, IBM, and Amex. So we've seen demand from two sides: as large corporate demand for flex space and co-working solutions, but then also SMEs and how they're looking for flex space right now. So hopefully I can give your event and your viewers an interesting perspective.
So people are talking about flex space and particularly looking at co-working and looking at the opportunities. So maybe for big corporates, there's going to be changes, but there's also going to be changes in flex space and more people using co-working. Do you see that being the case in London and outside of London? Do you see regional differences as well?
Massively. So, in the initial stages of lockdown, demand for flex space went down across the UK by as much as 60%. But in the last week or so, we're probably 5 to 10% off what you might call normal levels of demand for flex space. It's really bounced back. And, I'm not trying to PR the cause or anything, but it surprised even me just how much demand has bounced back so quickly. You wouldn't, given the significance of the economic consequences facing us, thought there'd be that much demand from companies of all sizes, firstly. But secondly, within the UK itself, the demand for regional flex space didn't actually go down as much as London. I mean, we were down 50%, but that's crept right back up. So we've been doing deals for regional flex space right through lockdown, which again was a real surprise to me and shows just how much demand there is. And I can go into that at the conference on Monday, because regional demand for flex space is a really thorny issue right now. We can see more and more demand from clients of all sizes, but they simply haven't gotten enough access to enough space. So between operators of flex space and landlords, we need to probably have more understanding, just purely to ramp up the amount of supply there is, because there isn't enough to satisfy demand. And that was pre-COVID. Post-COVID already, we've seen some from our work in Asia Pac and now America, that demand has spiked again. So we've seen corporates, rather than try and take their HQ and clean it up and get it ready, it's quicker and more proficient for them to take 50 or 100 desks of flex space and provide it to get their teams client facing again. So that's already been happening from big clients across Australia now, Hong Kong and Singapore. To get things up and running, they're taking flex space and then they're providing it to their staff, who have said, look, we don't want to travel, but we need location to work because we can't work at home. What can you provide for us? And for the heads of commercial real estate, it's been a relatively quick and easy solution to procure more flex space, not less, for the moment. So it's an interesting time.
So you see it not just from a UK perspective, but a global perspective, therefore. So
exactly that. So sorry, yeah, we're basing our supposition on global data, but when I was referring to regional data, I was referring to the UK specifically. That UK regional data has stayed buoyant, pretty buoyant, throughout lockdown. So my intention is not to overhype it, but you look at the 4,500 leases or so that are coming up for renewal over the next few months, and having spoken to a lot of clients during lockdown, I struggle to foresee how many are going to be signing leases again when there's so much uncertainty in the market. Unless the terms are exceptional, why would you, if you're a company of any size right now, commit to a 5-year lease or similar at a time when there is so little known about our economic reality?
And John, just explain to the listeners, the Instant Group is purely office, is that correct? No retail?
No retail. We're purely providing flexible workspace. However, in speaking to a lot of people in the market, not least a couple of really big landlords in the US and global landlords, in fact, they have said that, obviously retail has been hammered. Their retail portfolio has been hammered. They've been collecting office receipts thus far, but retail much less so. So they're, to put it lightly, they're anticipating very hard times in retail. And they, as our sector, are looking at retail as being a potential source of flex workspace. And what more could go into latent retail space, such as co-working space? Because if more of us are going to be working from nearer to home, is the way that the thinking goes, will we find places to work which sell decent coffee and have good Wi-Fi on the high street, which used to be a Gap or an Oasis or something similar? Now that, as I say, is all supposition based, but I've heard it from enough people for me to now think, well, this is obviously something tangible and will become something tangible. And it may be one cure to have more kind of mixed use high streets rather than those purely devoted to retail.
Interesting, because one of the panelists is Will Stokes, whose site in Reading, I believe, is in a shopping centre. So I haven't been to it, but that's what I've been told from a third party. So it's interesting about potentially office space going into former retail space. Do you think that potentially could be London or more regional? What do you have a view on that?
Well, potentially more regional. I mean, Reading and the Thames Valley is an interesting market, because if we're looking at more of a work near home model, and we're looking at hub and spoke office portfolios, i.e. you retain a bit of central London office space, but then you give your staff space all over the southeast, for example. One, again, easy conclusion to draw is those markets that are served by Crossrail, so are Reading, Maidenhead, all of that corridor. Why would you not want to try and take some space from either a large corporate perspective or even a smaller business, take some space on flex terms, so your team can say, well, look, we're going to work from Reading 2-3 days a week. We'll go to London for a day's meetings, but we'll reduce our headcount and our office size in the capital, which is very expensive per square foot. But we'll need the Reading office market to cough up more options, of which your client's portfolio could be one.
So I was going to say, final question, because we're going to have much more time on Monday. What opportunities are you open to, or how can people connect with you, John?
So there's two ways of the way we work. There's two different parts of the business. One, we take requirements from big corporates looking for space, looking for flex space. We negotiate, or we sign a lease on behalf of the client. We go back to back with the client on a deal. We hold and deal with the relationship with the landlord. We fund the capex for the fit out. We do the facilities management and the delivery of the space, and we bill our client on a quarterly basis as they would do with a flex workspace provider. And that's increasingly how a number of big corporates are taking their space outside of their core real estate. So that's we've done a lot of that work now in Bristol and Birmingham, some in Manchester. We've just completed in Liverpool. It's an interesting way for clients to take space flexibly and cost effectively without the capex. So if landlords want to work with us on those opportunities, we are all ears, firstly. Secondly, as consultants, we're advising a lot of flexible workspace operators like an Office Group or a TOG or a WeWork or similar, we're advising them on the market and where to go next. And we look at the market supply and demand data. And so, with your group of investors and landlords, we can give them a very distinct view of where that supply, demand, and pricing comes from, how much they should be looking at flex space or otherwise. Does that make sense?
It definitely does. So, John, how can people reach you?
They can reach me at john.williams@theinstantgroup.com or via you, of course, Brendan. I'm also all over LinkedIn normally, talking about co-working or flex space. So there are unfortunately a million John Williamses on LinkedIn, as there are everywhere else in the world. So john.williams@theinstantgroup.com would be the best way of doing so. But I think Mondays will be a very interesting discussion because there's a lot to talk about. And there are short-term concerns for the office market, no doubt. But I think a lot of people feel that there's a real excitement about what it could become over the coming years.
I was going to say it's quite a diverse panel as well Monday, because I've also got Gavin Gallagher. So Gavin's got one of the largest office parks in Europe, which is called East Point. And I have to admit, he was going through some of the challenges, logistical challenges, which he's had to do in the last few weeks, which is a bit of a minefield to say the least. So it's great to have yourself on board. Will Stokes, as I say, from CoSpace, I think it's CoSpace, and also Gavin Gallagher, and also having a lender on board as well, formerly from Shawbrook, now Lendwell, Karen Bennett. So we've also got Alex Hearn, Sealands Hearn, a chartered surveyor. So looking at the opportunities in office as well. So John, I just want to say massive thanks, and thanks to the audience as well.
Look forward to it. It should be good.